The sun was just beginning to dip beneath the jagged ridges of the New Mexico horizon, casting long amber shadows across the cracked pavement of Highway 41. Dust curled in lazy spirals behind Clara Monroe's SUV as she pulled into the Redstone gas station. It was one of those remote outposts that always felt like they belonged more to memory than to the present, half abandoned, half functional, and somehow timeless. The kind of place where the wind carried secrets no one wanted to hear again. In the passenger seat, Lena Monroe stretched her arms and yawned. Her summer dress was wrinkled from a long drive, her earbuds dangling from one ear as she looked at her mother with mild impatience. "Can we please hurry? I seriously need to pee," she said with a playful roll of her eyes. Clara smiled faintly. "Sure, kid. Grab something to drink after. I'll fill the tank." It was the kind of moment that felt entirely forgettable at the time, an everyday exchange. But Clara would come to replay it in her mind thousands of times later, like a reel stuck on loop. Lena stepped out, her sneakers crunching on gravel, as she made her way toward the restroom around the side of the store. Clara leaned against the car, set the nozzle, and listened to the satisfying click of gasoline rushing into the tank. The desert was quiet, save for the occasional whoosh of a car passing far off on the highway and the metallic buzz of a loose sign overhead. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Clara checked her phone, tapped her foot. "Lena?" she called, striding toward the side of the building. The restroom door stood ajar, swinging lightly in the wind. Inside, nothing. No sign of her daughter. Clara's chest tightened. She knocked, then pushed the door open fully, scanning the small, grimy interior. Empty. Not a footprint. Not a sound. Just the hollow stillness of something that should have been mundane, but now felt terribly wrong. A cold edge crept down Clara's spine. She darted into the store, her voice raised. "Have you seen my daughter?" Blonde girl, 18, just went into the restroom. The clerk, a young guy with glazed eyes and earbuds tucked into his hoodie, shrugged. "Nah, I didn't notice." He pointed lazily toward the ceiling. "Cameras don't work anyway. Been busted since, like, February." Clara's blood ran cold. She stormed behind the counter, pushing aside papers until she found the security feed monitor. Static. Nothing but black and white fuzz. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered, a leaden sense of dread settling in her gut. She bolted outside, scanning the horizon. Her car. The gas pump. An old pickup truck with no plates that had been parked in the back was now gone. Clara's eyes narrowed. The timeline. The blind spots. The gut feeling. It all added up too fast. She was no longer just a mother looking for her daughter. Instinct took over. She was Clara Monroe, once a decorated criminal investigator with 10 years of field work under her belt, now disgraced and suspended after a high-profile arrest had gone sideways. An arrest that had left 2 men dead and a cartel's watchful eye focused squarely on her. The past, long buried beneath fragile stability, surged back into her veins like fire. She reached for her phone and called 911. Her voice was calm, too calm. "My daughter is missing. I believe she's been abducted. Send someone to Redstone gas station. Now." The dispatcher tried to ask standard questions, but Clara had already hung up. Her fingers flew over her phone as she accessed old contacts. Colleagues who still owed her favors. People who remembered what she could do before politics destroyed her badge. Her thoughts spun, but her posture was all muscle memory. She retraced every second. The pickup truck, dark green, missing front plate. A sticker of a snake curling around a wrench on the back window. The direction it likely took. Who would take Lena? And why here? And why now? That's when the old fear returned, gnawing at her spine, the one she hadn't felt in years. The fear that some ghost from her past had come to collect. It couldn't be random. It felt targeted. Clara sat back in her SUV, breath short, clutching the photo of Lena she always kept in her wallet. The girl's smile beamed out from the small, bent photo paper. The light in those blue eyes. The same blue Clara saw every morning in her own mirror. Her mind refused to imagine a world where those eyes could ever be extinguished. She swore to herself, silently, bitterly, "I will find you, no matter who I have to burn down to get there." She didn't know then that this would be the first step in a journey that would stretch across years, state lines, and into the darkest underbelly of organized trafficking rings. All she knew in that moment was this: Lena hadn't just vanished. Someone had taken her, and Clara Monroe was going to war. The morning after Lena's disappearance, Clara sat alone in a dingy motel room just off the highway, her fingers trembling slightly as she flipped open the cracked screen of her old laptop. She hadn't touched the thing in months, but muscle memory guided her as she opened encrypted folders and pulled up the database she had secretly mirrored from her old precinct server before her suspension. Most of the entries were cold cases, files she had obsessively archived over the past 2 years when insomnia and guilt refused to let her rest. She'd started noticing a pattern back then, but no one had taken her seriously. Young women, most between the ages of 17 and 22, vanishing from rural gas stations, truck stops, or rest areas scattered across the Southwest. Always late at night or during low traffic hours. Always alone. Always gone without a trace. But now, with Lena missing, Clara's suspicion calcified into conviction. She typed furiously, filtering the old entries by location, time, and circumstance. Her breath caught as 5 cases blinked into view, each bearing chilling similarities. San Jacinto, NM. Wickenburg, Arizona. Cedar Creek, Texas. El Camino, NV. And now Redstone. All within the same network of West Trail fuel stations. All with camera malfunctions reported at the time of the incidents. Clara leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She printed out each file, marking the map she'd taped across the motel wall, with a red marker for every disappearance. When connected, the pins traced a subtle but deliberate curve, an invisible path that moved east to west, then sharply dipped south near the Mexican border. She knew this wasn't just coincidence. It was a corridor, a route, and someone was using it. She began compiling a timeline, overlaying the disappearances with trucking schedules, festival weekends, and even law enforcement shifts in rural towns. Patterns emerged, and with them names. But the breakthrough came when Clara scrolled through a dusty, near-defunct biker forum known as Steel Throne. A user named Ghost Chain had posted a blurry, low-res image titled Desert Queen, timestamped just 2 weeks before Lena vanished. The image showed a group of bikers posing near a desert bar. In the center stood a tall, heavily muscled man with long dark hair and a full beard. His leather vest unzipped just enough to reveal a tattoo along his forearm. Clara zoomed in, heart hammering, sweat gathering on her brow despite the cold motel AC. The tattoo was hyper-realistic, a pair of eyes, painted with such haunting precision it seemed they were watching her through the screen. And not just any eyes. Clara knew those eyes better than her own. Lena's eyes. Same tilt, same depth, same rare steel blue hue. She didn't breathe for several seconds, fear and fury coiling in her gut like a viper ready to strike. She screenshot the image, enhanced it with every tool she had, and cross-referenced facial recognition software she still had access to through her contacts. The man's alias was Rogue. No full name, no fixed address, but the software linked him to a notorious motorcycle club known as the Black Veins, active throughout the Southwest. Rogue's name had been flagged years ago in an investigation involving narcotics and suspected human trafficking, but no charges had ever stuck. The last known location? Sierra Cross, Arizona. Clara opened a fresh page in her field notebook and scribbled in red ink, "Find Rogue. Sierra Cross. Eyes equals Lena." She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she spent hours digging through VIN numbers of bikes registered to Black Veins MC, mapped sightings from truckers on Reddit threads, and traced bar names mentioned in biker circles. One name came up repeatedly: the Cactus Jack, a roadside bar infamous for its ties to underground racing and rumored connections to criminal rings. Clara packed quickly the next morning, taping Lena's photo on the inside of her wallet where she could see it every time she reached for cash. With her map now dotted with string and pins like the storyboard of a psychological thriller, she started her car and headed west toward Arizona. She drove in silence, only the hum of the tires and her own breathing to accompany her. In her glove compartment was a Glock she hadn't legally carried in years, tucked beside a bundle of old case notes, and a burner phone registered under the name Marie Wallace. She wasn't just Clara the mother anymore. She was Clara the investigator again. And this time, no red tape or politics would get in her way. Somewhere in the dry expanse of Sierra Cross, someone had Lena, and he had made the mistake of marking her face into his flesh. As the miles slipped by and the desert widened, Clara narrowed her focus with sniper-like precision. She had an aim. She had a location. She had a pattern. She just didn't have time. The deeper she dug into the disappearances, the more it became clear that Lena wasn't the only victim still alive. But none of them would stay that way for long if Clara didn't move fast. And Rogue, whoever he truly was, had left more clues than he thought. One in particular caught her eye late that night in the parking lot of a diner in Gallup. Another user from Steel Throne had uploaded a short video clip taken outside the Cactus Jack, showing a group of bikers revving their engines. The angle was shaky, the light poor, but for 1/2 second, the camera panned across a woman stepping out of the bar behind Rogue. Clara nearly dropped her phone. The figure was silhouetted, face turned away. But the walk, the slight hesitation in her step, the way her right hand instinctively clutched her left wrist. It was Lena. Clara knew it in her bones. No image enhancement was needed. She closed her eyes and breathed deep, fingers tightening around the phone. The woman behind Rogue might not be the same girl who had once danced barefoot in Clara's kitchen, but she was Lena. Changed, hardened, possibly broken, but alive. And that was enough. Clara put the car in gear and turned onto the dark highway, the motel behind her fading into the night. Sierra Cross was only 3 hours away, and somewhere in that stretch of desert and neon, her daughter waited. Sierra Cross rose from the desert like a forgotten ruin dressed in neon, the kind of place that didn't exist on tourist maps and survived on secrets more than sunlight. Clara pulled into town just before sundown, the sky a dusky gold bleeding into deep indigo, casting long shadows that stretched across the cracked asphalt. The air was dry, laced with distant smells of motor oil, cheap beer, and dust. She parked the SUV across from a squat, aging building crowned in flickering red lights that spelled out the Cactus Jack. A dozen motorcycles were lined up along the front, their chrome exteriors glinting menacingly under the failing light. Clara sat for a minute in silence, eyes locked on the front entrance. If Rogue was here, and she believed with every fiber of her being that he was, then this was the closest she'd been to Lena in 9 years. Her hand brushed the pistol beneath her jacket as she stepped out of the vehicle, not to draw it, but to remind herself it was there, a silent companion of her past life now stitched into the fabric of her present one. The bouncer didn't stop her. Women walking in alone weren't uncommon here, just ignored. The moment she stepped inside, the wave of sound hit her like a freight train, laughter, music, clinking glass, and the low throb of bass from a jukebox that hadn't seen an update since the early 2000s. She moved through the smoky interior like a ghost, eyes scanning faces, hands, tattoos. And then she saw him, Rogue, sitting at the far end of the bar, backlit by the dim glow of the wall liquor shelf, a bottle of Jack Daniels in one hand, a cigar in the other. He was bigger in person, all sinew and shadow, his long hair tied back, jaw covered in salt and pepper stubble. His leather vest bore the insignia of the Black Veins MC, an oil-stained heart impaled by a thorn chain. Clara eased into a seat at the opposite end of the bar, careful not to draw attention. From this angle, she could see it, the tattoo. His right forearm rested on the bar top, and there they were, Lena's eyes, immortalized in ink and detail, so precise they seemed to glimmer under the dim lights. She hadn't imagined it. It wasn't coincidence. Rogue didn't glance her way, too absorbed in whatever joke the man beside him was telling. But Clara couldn't take her eyes off that tattoo. Her daughter was branded on the arm of a man who drank whiskey like water and laughed like nothing in the world could touch him. When the bartender approached, Clara ordered a soda, her voice calm, rehearsed. She waited until the man returned before leaning in slightly. "He always drink at this end?" she asked casually, jerking her chin toward Rogue. The bartender, a weathered man in his 50s with a faded guns and roses shirt and eyes that had seen too much, gave her a once-over. "Depends who's a skin," he muttered. Clara slid a folded 20 across the counter. "Someone who's not here for the booze." The man eyed the bill, took it, and nodded once. "Name's Rogue. Doesn't talk much unless he's interested. You're not his type." Clara ignored the jab. The eyes on his arm. They mean something. The bartender hesitated, glanced toward Rogue, then leaned in closer. "He calls her Crystal. Says she's his queen, or whatever. Works out at the Mirage." Clara's blood chilled. "Velvet Mirage?" The man nodded. "Yeah. Strip joint just outside town. Everyone knows it's more than that. Cops stay away. So should you." Clara didn't flinch. "Crystal, is that her real name?" "No one uses real names there," he muttered. "But she's got those same eyes. Hard to forget. Some say she ain't there by choice. Most don't ask." Clara looked down at her drink, gripping the glass tightly to keep her hands from trembling. Lena was alive. Not just alive, but close. So close she could walk out the door right now and drive 10 minutes and possibly see her face. But she couldn't move too fast. Not yet. Not without knowing what kind of hell she was walking into. "What else can you tell me?" she asked, lowering her voice. "About the Mirage. About Crystal." The bartender hesitated again, visibly weighing the risk. Then he sighed. "Velvet Mirage is run by the club. Not officially, of course, but Rogue and a few others make the calls. Girls go in, some never come out. They rotate 'em, keeping high. Some tourists get what they want. Others don't even know what they're buying." Clara swallowed hard, her stomach churning. "She's been there long?" 3 years, maybe more. But if you're thinking of getting her out, don't. You won't make it past the front door without someone sniffing you out." Clara dropped another 20. "Let me worry about that." The man took the bill and leaned back. "Just don't say I didn't warn you." She stayed another 20 minutes, pretending to sip her drink, her eyes never far from Rogue, who now laughed too loudly at something on his phone. He leaned back, his sleeve riding up again, and Clara memorized every detail of the tattoo. She had no doubt now. Lena's image was etched there like a possession. Clara finished her soda, left cash on the counter, and exited the bar into the warm, windless night. She crossed the street, got into her SUV, and sat in silence for several minutes, breathing deeply, pulse pounding in her ears. Velvet Mirage, Crystal, her daughter. Somewhere behind pink neon lights and double-locked doors, Lena existed. The name Crystal was a cage, but it also confirmed something Clara had only dared to hope. Lena was still being kept, not discarded. That meant leverage. That meant Rogue hadn't let go. Which meant Lena still had value to them. Which meant Clara still had time. The question now was how much, and how deep she would have to go to tear her out. The next night arrived cloaked in desert silence, heavy and suffocating, the kind that settled deep into Clara's bones as she parked her vehicle on the shoulder of a dirt road that overlooked the rear of the Velvet Mirage. The club itself pulsed like a siren in the night, pink and purple neon signs flickering against the outline of jagged hills behind it. But Clara's attention was focused not on the main entrance, where a line of men stretched around the block, but on the back, the side no customer ever saw. She'd spent the entire day in town staking out the building from a distance, noting every detail. 2 staff entrances, one guarded, one not. A narrow alleyway used by women entering or leaving on foot. A gated dirt lot behind the compound that housed several portable trailers and what looked like converted motel rooms. From the overlook, using a pair of military-grade night vision binoculars she'd borrowed years ago and never returned, Clara could see it all clearly. She had arrived just before sundown, blending her vehicle into a cluster of tall desert brush, the silver of her SUV muted under a layer of dust she'd kicked up intentionally. The waiting was the worst part. Hours passed, and the temperature dropped sharply. The crowd at the front grew louder, the buzz of music and shouting drifting across the open stretch. Clara remained still, watching, documenting every figure who moved through the back gate. Most of the traffic was predictable: guards, staff members, a delivery van that came and went, headlights off. But it was just after 11:17 p.m. when the back door of the compound opened again, and 4 women stepped out in single file, all of them dressed in short skirts and tight tops, faces blurred beneath dim lighting. They crossed the open courtyard quickly, one of them noticeably lagging behind the others. Clara adjusted the zoom on her binoculars, her heart jumping. The last girl moved slower, her posture slightly off, her right shoulder drooping. And the way she stepped, left foot strong, right foot trailing just a hair late, a half-inch lower than it should have been, was unmistakable. It was a limp. Not dramatic, not artificial, but a signature Clara recognized instantly. Lena had that walk since she was 10 years old, after a bike accident that fractured her ankle. Even after it healed, the bones never aligned perfectly again. It was subtle but permanent. No amount of time or trauma could erase it. Clara's throat tightened, and she blinked rapidly as tears welled up behind her eyes. Her fingers curled tightly around the binoculars, white-knuckled, her breath catching in her throat as she whispered aloud, "Lena." The girl reached the far end of the compound, where she and another woman disappeared into a small structure lit by a single bare bulb over the door. Clara watched the door shut, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears. She stayed locked in place for another 40 minutes, confirming the pattern. Women exited from one building, crossed the courtyard, entered another. Men occasionally followed, but not always. Guards lingered by the perimeter, but paid little attention to the comings and goings, suggesting a routine. Clara took note of every camera she could spot and marked potential blind spots. The operation was clearly running on confidence and secrecy, but not sophistication. She pulled out her phone and snapped photos through the binoculars, poor in quality, but better than nothing. Every frame was a piece of the puzzle she was assembling, a record in case things went sideways. At 12:03 a.m., the girl returned. Same outfit, same limp, same hair, though darker and longer than Clara remembered. But the posture, the way she hugged her arms to her chest, the cautious glance over her shoulder, they weren't just habits. They were defense mechanisms. Clara felt her stomach clench in both sorrow and rage. Lena was here, alive, moving, surviving. But under whose control? And for how long? A second figure followed her out, this one male, broad-shouldered, his face obscured beneath a ball cap. He grabbed Lena's arm too tightly, leading her across the yard with a kind of rough familiarity that made Clara's jaw lock. She snapped more photos, documenting everything. The man led Lena back into the main building through a side door marked staff only. Clara watched the door shut behind them, the shadows swallowing them whole. For the first time in 9 years, she had seen her daughter. Not in a dream, not on a poster, not in a memory, in real time, in a place where people disappeared and never came back. She could taste the adrenaline in her mouth, bitter and electric. Her hands were steady, but inside she was shaking. The night deepened, stars sharp above, the moon a faint smear behind desert clouds. Clara reviewed the images she'd captured, grainy, but proof. Proof Lena was alive, in captivity, still herself. She zoomed in on the limp, the profile, the slope of her shoulders. There could be no doubt. It was her. It had to be her. But seeing wasn't enough. She needed a plan. She needed entry. She needed to know what they did inside that building, what kind of control they had over her daughter. She needed to understand the chain of command, who gave the orders, who enforced them, who watched from the shadows. And she needed to find out how to break it all apart without losing Lena in the process. Because one thing was certain, if she made a wrong move, they would vanish again. And next time, there might be no trail to follow. Clara didn't sleep after that night. The image of Lena, walking, hesitating, under control but undeniably alive, played on repeat behind her eyes every time she closed them. By morning, she had crafted a new persona, shedding her motherly skin and replacing it with the cold precision of someone who belonged to the world she was about to step into. Her contacts had taught her enough over the years to fake confidence, to project wealth, demand exclusivity. She pulled from her trunk a tailored black suit, dark lipstick, sunglasses that framed her face with intimidating detachment, and a silver cuff bracelet with a hidden recording chip inside. By noon, she drove straight to Velvet Mirage, pulling into the gravel lot like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The midday sun made the pink neon flicker with a sickly hue, and Clara caught her own reflection in the building's mirrored doors, a ghost wrapped in armor. Inside, the club was hushed, not yet in full swing, but there were still a few patrons lingering near the bar and a group of dancers stretching near the private stages. A receptionist with platinum extensions and overly whitened teeth looked up, momentarily startled. Clara walked in like a storm dressed in satin and said, "I'm here for your premium services. I was told to ask for Rogue." The woman blinked, hesitated, then reached for a phone behind the counter. "And what should I tell him it's regarding?" "Blue eyes," Clara replied, her tone like ice. "A very specific request. Discretion is assumed." The woman nodded, clearly trained to recognize someone important. She made the call, whispered into the receiver, and then gestured to a hallway lit in deep crimson. "He'll see you now. Last door on the right." Clara adjusted her sunglasses, gave a slight nod, and walked through the velvet-lined corridor, each step echoing on the glossy floor. The final door opened before she reached it. Rogue stood there, tall and imposing, his tattooed arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "You asked for me?" he said, voice low and rough. Clara didn't flinch. "Yes. I was told you have access to certain unique offerings. I represent clients who pay well for women who are rare, authentic. I hear one of yours has a particularly striking set of blue eyes." His gaze sharpened, but he stepped aside to let her in. "You came to the right place," he said, closing the door behind them. The room beyond was an office, not really. It looked like a cross between a lounge and an interrogation space, leather chairs, a glass decanter of bourbon, security monitors muted in one corner. Clara sat down slowly, her posture regal. I want to see for myself before I recommend anything. My clients trust me to verify quality, not just looks, spirit. Rogue tilted his head, amused. Spirit, huh? Blue eyes mean nothing without the fire behind them, Clara replied, letting her voice drip with practiced indifference. Rogue poured himself a drink, then gestured toward another door. You're in luck. There's a showing tonight. Exclusive company only. You can sit in. Decide if our crystal meets your expectations. Clara's heart stopped for a moment. Crystal. The name the bartender had mentioned. The one Lena had been assigned. But she forced a casual smile. Perfect. Hours later, Clara found herself seated in the back row of a private viewing room she'd once only imagined existed in the nightmares of traffic souls. The walls were dark, the lighting dim, but focused on the stage. Several other patrons sat nearby, all men, all wealthy-looking and uninterested in one another. Rogue stood near the edge of the platform, introducing the girls with rehearsed lines, as though they were auctioning rare art. One by one, young women walked onto the stage. Their names were not real. Their smiles were not real. Some of them swayed as if medicated. Clara took note of every face, every movement, holding her breath each time the curtain rustled. And then Rogue's tone changed. Our next companion is one of our most exclusive assets. She's been requested across 3 states, but she only performs here. Gentlemen, Crystal. Clara's stomach dropped. The music slowed. The curtain parted. And there she was, Lena, or what was left of her. Her hair was darker now, nearly black, cascading in soft waves that framed a face too hollow for her age. Her body was thinner, her cheekbones sharper, and yet unmistakably hers. Her movements were mechanical, rehearsed, but her eyes, those same steel-blue eyes, scanned the room with a flicker of presence, a flicker of life. Clara couldn't breathe. She gripped the armrest tightly, keeping her face turned slightly, praying that Lena wouldn't recognize her and shatter the fragile mask that kept them both alive in that moment. Lena moved to the center of the stage, her gaze drifting just above the heads of the audience. Rogue listed her attributes like she was describing wine, her elegance, her discretion, her adaptability, and Clara could feel herself sinking into rage. But she didn't move. She didn't react. She memorized every detail, watched Lena's hands tremble slightly, watched her blink too often, as if fighting back something just beneath the surface. And then for a split second, Lena looked toward the back row. Her eyes passed over Clara, then paused. Clara's heart seized. She looked away quickly, pretending to cough, shifting in her chair. When she glanced back, Lena was still staring, a subtle crease forming between her brows. Clara lowered her head, shielding her face behind a raised hand. The moment passed. Rogue clapped once, signaling the end of the presentation. The girls were led offstage. Lena didn't look back. Clara exhaled slowly, trying not to cry. Rogue approached, clearly expecting a response. "What do you think?" he asked, smugness laced in his voice. Clara composed herself. "Impressive," she said, cool and professional. "But I need more than a preview before making recommendations." Rogue smirked. "That can be arranged." Clara didn't let her hands tremble as she followed Rogue down another hallway, deeper into the velvet-lined veins of Velvet Mirage. Her heels echoed against the marble floor, while the low thump of bass from the club throbbed faintly behind the walls. The men who had attended the private showcase were now retreating to curtained rooms, or disappearing behind guarded doors, their laughter oily and low. Rogue turned slightly as they passed a junction, his eyes narrowing as if calculating her worth beyond the front she projected. "Before we discuss anything serious," he said, "you'll want to freshen up. Bathroom through there." He pointed to a narrow doorway framed by cracked tiles and the faded remnants of an old chandelier. Clara gave him a cool nod and entered without hesitation. The room was dimly lit, clean but sterile, mirrors stretching across the length of the wall, a faint citrus cleaner scent masking something darker underneath. She locked the door behind her, turned toward the stalls, empty, and pressed her back against the cold tile. Her breath caught in her throat. For a few seconds she allowed herself to close her eyes, to feel the full weight of the last few hours crash over her. But the moment didn't last. A quiet knock came at the door, then a pause. A muffled voice said, "Miss said to check if you're okay." The tone was unsure, feminine, lightly trembling. Clara hesitated for a beat, then stepped forward and unlocked the door without opening it fully. "Come in," she said softly. The girl entered. Clara knew, before she saw her face. The shape of the silhouette, the hesitance in her step, the way her fingers played nervously with the hem of her sleeve. It was Lena. Up close now, her features were clearer. The sharpness of her cheekbones, the slight bruise beneath her eye concealed with makeup, the strain around her lips. Her hair fell in dark waves around her shoulders, but her eyes, those impossibly familiar steel blue eyes, widened as she took in Clara's face. She stopped, frozen mid-step, breath-catching. "You," her voice cracked. "It's you." Clara's vision blurred. Her voice came out in a whisper. "Lena." They didn't move for a second, as if the air between them had turned to glass. Then Lena stumbled backward, reaching for the wall, her face crumpling as tears welled up. "No, it can't be. They said you'd stopped. That no one would find me." Clara moved slowly, cautiously, closing the space between them with steps measured and filled with aching restraint. She wanted nothing more than to pull her daughter into her arms, to crush the distance the years had carved. But she couldn't. Not yet. Lena flinched at first, but when Clara whispered again, "It's me. It's Mom," her defenses cracked. I thought you were a client," Lena choked. "I didn't recognize you." Her voice was both fragile and aged, years of forced silence wrapped in a single breath. Clara stepped closer, raising her hands, palms up. "I never stopped. Not once. I've looked everywhere." Lena's lip quivered, her eyes scanning Clara's face as if trying to reconcile this moment with 1,000 imagined reunions. She suddenly surged forward, burying her face into her mother's shoulder. Her body shook with silent sobs. Clara held her, not tightly, gently, as if holding porcelain. "We don't have long," Clara whispered. "They think I'm here as a buyer. You have to tell me everything. Quickly." Lena pulled back, wiping her eyes with trembling hands, her voice hushed but intense. "I'm not just one of the girls, Mom. I'm leverage. That's why they keep me here. That's why they won't let me vanish like the others." Clara frowned, her instincts sharpened. Leverage against who? Lena looked toward the door, voice barely audible. "Against Rogue." Clara blinked. "But he's the one showing you off like a trophy." Lena shook her head. "Not everything is what it looks like. Rogue, he's not the real boss. Not anymore. He betrayed someone years ago, someone in the original cartel that ran this operation. They should have killed him, but they didn't. Instead, they gave him me. As punishment. As control." Her hands clutched at her arms as if cold. "He was told to protect me, to keep me visible. As long as I stay breathing and broken, they let him live. If I disappear or if I talk, they'll wipe him out. And everyone around him." Clara processed the information quickly. It made sense. The obsession, the tattoo, the contradiction of displaying Lena like a trophy while also protecting her. "So you're the leash," Clara murmured. The leash wrapped around his neck. Lena nodded. "They call me Crystal to remind him that I'm beautiful, untouchable, and owned. I've seen men disappear for less than asking my real name." Clara clenched her jaw, rage curdling in her gut. "Why haven't you run? Why not escape?" "I tried," Lena whispered. "Twice. Once they caught me. The second time, someone else paid the price. A girl I trusted, she vanished. No one said anything. Just blood in the laundry room and a new girl the next day." Her eyes shone with fear and fury. "They watch everything. Even now. There's a camera in the hall above the sink. This place is a maze of eyes." Clara turned slightly, calculating. "We need to get you out. Quietly. Soon." "You can't," Lena hissed. "If they find out you're not who you say you are, they'll kill you first. And then they'll move me to Tucson, or worse, one of the foreign houses." Clara's hand went to her pocket, subtly activating the recorder in her bracelet. "I need names. Routines. How many girls? Guards. Anything you can give me." Lena reached into her pocket, pulled out a matchbook with tiny symbols drawn inside the fold. "This is what I've remembered. I can't write it down, so I draw. This is the schedule, the exits, the vans they use. But you have to go now. They'll get suspicious." Clara took the matchbook, her hand brushing Lena's. "I'm not leaving without you." "You have to," Lena said, tears returning. "You'll get me killed if you stay. But if you live, if you get this to someone, maybe I won't die here." Her voice broke on the last word, and Clara felt her own strength falter. A knock sounded at the door, sharp and expectant. "Everything okay in there?" a man's voice called. Clara pulled Lena into one last quick embrace, then straightened her jacket, wiping away a single tear. "I'll be back," she whispered. "I swear." She unlocked the door. Clara emerged from the restroom with her posture composed, heart hammering beneath layers of fabric and facade. The man waiting outside eyed her for a beat too long, but she offered a curt nod, brushing past him with a cool indifference she'd practiced all her life in interrogation rooms. As she returned to the lounge where Rogue was waiting, her mind raced with timelines, with Lena's whispered warnings and the matchbook now tucked deep into her boot, damp from the sweat of urgency. Rogue stood near the bar, a half-smile playing on his lips, but there was something tighter in his jaw now, something colder in his eyes. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Perfect," Clara replied. "Your girl was professional, like clockwork." Rogue raised an eyebrow, studying her. Interesting choice of words. He poured another drink, set it down without drinking. "You know, it's funny. I was just talking to someone. They said a woman came into Cactus Jack last night asking about Blue Eyes. A woman who didn't quite fit the clientele." Clara didn't blink. Small town. Word travels fast. "It does," he agreed. "And sometimes it brings ghosts with it." He stepped closer, and now Clara could feel it, the shift, the drop in temperature between them. The act was crumbling. He'd seen something, heard something. Or maybe Lena had slipped somehow. "You're not who you say you are," Rogue said, voice low. "You don't look at girls like merchandise. You look at them like you're counting exits, like you're building a case in your head." Clara tilted her head slightly, her voice calm. "If you thought I was a cop, I'd already be dead." "You're right," Rogue said, stepping even closer. "Which means you're something worse. A mother." And just like that, the veil dropped. Clara reached for her bracelet, ready to trigger the emergency beacon she'd rigged to her burner phone. But Rogue moved faster. His hand slammed against her wrist, pinning it to the wall. "Where is she?" he hissed. "What did she tell you?" Clara didn't answer, twisting her body to the side, kicking out with her heel. He stumbled back, snarling. She ran. Down the hallway, past the mirrored walls and dim lights, heart pounding in her ears. She needed to get out. Now. But the moment she reached the side exit, two bikers blocked the way, pulling weapons. "She's compromised," one of them barked into a radio. "Boss says bring her in." Both of them. The other one added, "Lena too?" "No," the first replied. "Crystal. He said kill the mom first. Make her watch." Clara ducked behind a stack of crates, pulling her gun, breath ragged. She didn't have time. If they got to Lena before her, a figure appeared beside her, sudden and silent. Not armed, not threatening. His voice low, urgent. "Come with me." Clara flinched. "Who the hell?" "Name's Ash," he said. "I don't have time to explain. I'm getting her out." "Why?" Clara demanded. "Why help us?" Ash's jaw tightened. "Because I used to love her. Before this place broke her. Before they turned her into crystal." Clara hesitated a second too long, then nodded. Ash led her through a maintenance corridor, past lockers and laundry bins and rows of stacked liquor crates. He moved with practiced efficiency, stopping only to yank open a heavy metal door concealed behind an old vending machine. A staircase descended into darkness. "Where does it lead?" Clara asked. "Old storm tunnel," he replied. "Used to be for deliveries before the club got fancy. They don't monitor it anymore. Too deep underground for cell signals. If we move now, we've got 5 minutes, maybe less." "We need her," Clara said. "Not just me. Her." Ash nodded. "She's waiting. I told her to be ready. She didn't believe I'd actually do it." Clara followed him down the steps, the darkness swallowing them whole. The tunnel was damp, the air thick with mildew and the metallic scent of rust. Pipes ran overhead, dripping occasionally, and Clara's boots splashed through shallow puddles. After a sharp turn, they found her, Lena, standing against the far wall, her arms wrapped around her body, eyes wide with disbelief. "You came," she whispered. Ash gave a grim smile. "Told you I would." Lena turned to Clara, voice shaking. "He knows." "I know," Clara said. "We're getting out. Now." Footsteps echoed behind them, faint, but growing louder. Clara took Lena's hand, Ash taking point with a small flashlight barely cutting through the gloom. They ran. The tunnel narrowed, twisted, then opened into a wider space that had once been part of an old storage facility. A rusted ladder led upward, and Clara could feel the air growing fresher. "We're close," Ash said. "Exits behind the motel. There's a fence, then open desert." "And after that?" Lena asked. "Then we disappear," Clara said. "Long enough to fight back the right way." But behind them, the footsteps quickened. The desert night swallowed their silhouettes as Clara, Lena, and Ash emerged from the hidden tunnel, lungs burning, legs weak from adrenaline and uneven ground. Behind them, faint shouts and barking orders echoed from the tunnel's mouth, but distance and darkness gave them a temporary shield. They didn't speak, not until they reached the rusted chain-link fence behind the dilapidated Desert Glint Motel, where Ash pulled bolt cutters from a buried stash beneath a half-buried crate. With 2 swift snaps, the metal gave way, and they slipped into the alley beyond. Clara grabbed her burner phone and, with hands that trembled more from emotion than exertion, typed a number she hadn't touched in years. It rang twice. "Lieutenant Barnes," came the gruff voice on the other end, clipped and no nonsense. "It's Clara Monroe," she said, breathless. A pause followed. "Well, damn," he muttered. "Took you long enough." "I found her," Clara said. "She's alive. And there's more. It's a trafficking ring. Girls. Guns. They're running it through Velvet Mirage and a second compound behind it. Rogues just a front." Barnes swore softly, the kind of oath laced with both anger and vindication. "Where are you?" "North Alley, behind Desert Glint. We need extraction now." Another pause. Send me coordinates. We've been trying to build a case on that place for 3 years. You have proof." Clara pulled the matchbook from her boot, snapped a photo of the codes Lena had drawn, and sent it to him. "More than proof," she said. "I've got the heart of it standing next to me." "ETA 20 minutes, Barnes said. "Tell her to stay hidden." And Clara, "Yeah. Let me do this one by the book." The call ended. Clara turned to Lena, who leaned against the brick wall, her body still shaking, eyes haunted. "Help is coming," she said. "You did it." Lena didn't smile. Her gaze drifted to Ash, who stood a few feet away, scanning the darkness like a dog guarding its last bone. Clara stepped closer to him. "Why did you come back?" she asked quietly. Ash didn't look at her. "Because someone had to." "You know they'll come after you too now," she said. "They'll mark you." "They already have," he replied. "I just finally gave them a reason." Clara wanted to say more, but headlights appeared in the distance, 2 black SUVs, lights off, gliding through the dark like predators. Barnes was fast. The first vehicle stopped at the alley's mouth, and a team of tactical officers spilled out, rifles drawn, movements silent and synchronized. Barnes emerged last, older than she remembered, his face harder, his hair all steel now. He met Clara's eyes without judgment, without nostalgia, just purpose. "We hit both locations," he said. "Your girl goes with the med team. You and Biker Boy stay behind me. No guns unless I say." Clara nodded. Lena hesitated. "I'm not leaving." "Yes," Clara said, "you are." But Barnes raised a hand. "We might need her. She knows the layout." "I'll be fine," Lena whispered. "Just don't let them take me again." They moved swiftly. The main club first. Flashbangs cracked the silence open like lightning, and armed officers stormed the velvet mirage, breaking down doors, pinning screaming patrons and panicked staff to the floor. Clara followed just behind Barnes, her weapon drawn but lowered. She knew the layout from memory and Lena's sketches. Inside, smoke curled around broken glass and flashing lights, screams cutting through music that had failed to shut off. Girls in various states of dress huddled behind couches, under tables, their faces twisted in disbelief. In the chaos, Lena spotted a figure racing toward the side hallway, the same one she had crossed so many times in silence. "There!" she shouted. Barnes followed, Clara at his side, Ash close behind. Down the corridor, through the security door, they entered the passage leading toward the back compound. Another explosion rocked the rear building. Tactical units had hit both ends. But they weren't fast enough. A single gunman emerged from the far hallway, tall, masked, rifle raised. He aimed directly at Lena. Time froze. Clara shouted. Barnes lifted his rifle, but had no angle. The trigger began to pull, and Ash moved. With no hesitation, he dove between Lena and the bullet. The shot rang out hollow final. Ash's body jerked as the round tore through his chest. He collapsed instantly, the breath knocked from him in a violent gasp. Lena screamed, her knees hitting the floor beside him. "No, no, 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 please." She pressed her hands against the wound, but the blood came too fast. Ash's eyes fluttered open for just a moment, locking onto hers. He smiled, faint, lips barely moving. "Told you I'd come back," he whispered. Then he stopped breathing. Barnes returned fire, dropping the gunman with a single shot. Clara fell to her knees beside Lena, pulling her close, shielding her from the sounds, the shouting, the footsteps around them. Lena clung to Ash's shirt, sobbing into his chest. "He was good," she choked. "He was the only one who was good." Clara ran a hand over Ash's forehead, closing his eyes. "He knew," she said softly. "And he chose this. For you." Barnes crouched beside them. "We're clear," he said. "We've secured the buildings. Over a dozen girls. armed guards, evidence everywhere. He looked down at Ash. Who was he? Clara stood, helping Lena up. The one decent man in a world that forgot how to be human. Lena didn't let go of his hand until they reached the waiting vehicle. The sun had barely risen when Clara stood in the interrogation observation room of Sierra Cross's local precinct, eyes fixed on the cracked monitor showing Rogue, bloody-lipped, handcuffed, and smirking as if this was all some performance piece tailored for her. Behind the glass, Barnes paced slowly, flipping through a folder thick with arrest warrants, weapons inventories, and victim lists, but Clara wasn't reading any of it. Her focus was only on the man inside the concrete box, the man who'd once branded her daughter's face onto his skin like a trophy and paraded her before monsters for years. Barnes stepped in beside her, his expression unreadable. "He asked for you," he said. "Won't talk to anyone else." Clara didn't move. "I'm not giving him what he wants." "Maybe not," Barnes replied, "but you'll want to hear this." With hesitation thick in her throat, Clara entered the interrogation room. Rogue didn't stand. He simply leaned back in his chair, blood drying on the corner of his mouth, eyes lighting up like he'd been waiting for a long-lost friend. "There she is," he drawled. "Clara Monroe. Still got that cop stiffness in your spine." Clara folded her arms. "You were never just some sick trafficker. You kept Lena for a reason." He tilted his head, lips curling. "Of course I did. I knew exactly who she was the moment I saw her face in that restroom, trembling, trying to be brave. She had your eyes. Cold, blue, calculating. The same eyes that stared at my father when you led him away in cuffs 15 years ago." Clara felt her stomach twist. "Your father." Rogue leaned forward, his voice thick with venom. "You remember Vincent Harrow, don't you? The ghost of El Paso? You built your entire career off putting him in a cage. He died there, alone, chained like an animal. I was 12. Clara's breath caught. She remembered that case, one of the largest trafficking busts of the decade, the one that earned her medals and press. She'd never known he had a son. "This was revenge," she whispered. "Lena was a message?" "No," Rogue said, eyes glinting. "She was a keepsake. My father kept trophies too, you know. I thought maybe if I had something that belonged to the woman who destroyed him, I could feel the same power." Clara clenched her fists, bile rising in her throat. "You destroyed her life. You branded her, paraded her like property." Rogue shrugged. "I never touched her like that. Not once. I let others think what they wanted. But I kept her alive. Protected. Controlled, yes, but not broken. Not like the others." "You think that makes you better?" Clara snapped. "You're just as monstrous." Rogue grinned. "Maybe. But not stupid. I kept her breathing because she mattered. Because someday I knew you'd come looking. And now here you are." Clara's voice hardened. "And now you'll rot like he did." She turned to leave, but he spoke again. "You should ask her about the girls. About the other names." Clara froze. "What girls?" "She watched everything," Rogue said. "Every transport. Every location. She listened to names whispered in hallways. Memorized routes no one else could trace. She didn't just survive. She cataloged everything." Clara didn't wait. She left the room and found Barnes, voice tight with urgency. "I need to see Lena. Now." Barnes didn't argue. He led her down the hall to a small side office where Lena sat with a trauma specialist. Eyes rimmed red, but clearer now. Her body wrapped in a blanket, a notebook open in front of her. Clara entered, closing the door behind her. "Lena," she said softly. "He told me you remembered." Lena looked up slowly, tears threatening again. "I didn't know how else to help. So I watched. I listened. Every time they moved a girl, I memorized the license plates. Every name. Every city." She handed Clara the notebook. There are 12 girls that I know of from 3 states. Some were taken like me. Others were sold before they even turned 16. Clara sat beside her, flipping through the pages, hand-drawn maps, lists of tattoos, shift schedules, coded language overheard in locker rooms, addresses she had no idea Lena had seen. It was a gold mine of evidence, painstakingly gathered by a girl who had been caged but never silent. "Why didn't you tell me?" Clara asked. "Why carry this alone?" Lena's voice cracked. "Because if they knew I remembered, they would have killed me. And Ash. And anyone I talked to. So I pretended. For years, I pretended I didn't know my own name." Clara pulled her into an embrace, burying her face in her daughter's hair, whispering, "You're the bravest person I've ever met." Barnes knocked gently and entered. "We cross-checked the names," he said, holding a file. "So far, 6 are confirmed missing. The rest, we're still looking. But we've launched simultaneous raids in Tucson, El Paso, and Santa Fe, all based on her intel." Clara looked at Lena, her chest tight with pride and sorrow. "You didn't just survive," she whispered. "You saved them." Lena sat on the edge of the examination table in a quiet wing of the Trauma Recovery Center, a sterile white room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender diffusers someone had kindly placed on the counter. Clara stood nearby, arms folded, trying to look calm though her stomach twisted with residual fear and exhaustion. The doctor, a soft-spoken woman in her 40s with kind eyes and steady hands, finished typing something into a tablet before clearing her throat gently. "Lena," she said carefully, her voice steady but warm, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay with me, okay?" Lena tensed immediately, eyes flicking to Clara, who stepped closer and nodded. The doctor glanced once between them and continued. "During your intake screening, we ran a standard set of medical panels and asked about your history. You mentioned irregularities, symptoms, things that could point to trauma, but also to maternity." Lena's eyes widened, lips parting slightly, confusion overtaking her bruised features. "What do you mean?" "You have given birth," the doctor said gently. "Approximately 2 years ago. There's surgical evidence of a cesarean. You didn't remember, but that's not uncommon when a victim is heavily medicated or disassociated." Clara stepped forward instinctively, placing a hand on Lena's back. "Are you saying she has a child?" "Yes," the doctor said. "And what's more, during the operation to dismantle Rogue's network, one of the recovery teams found documentation, paper files with coded numbers cross-referenced to individuals in the system. One entry was Marksy 117, a female toddler, assigned to a foster rotation facility in San Isidro. That tag was connected to Lena's profile." Lena stared at the wall for a long moment, silent, unmoving. Then her voice broke the air, barely a whisper. "She's alive." "She is," the doctor said. "And based on everything we found, she's safe. There's no evidence she's been harmed. They were raising her like inventory. But she's healthy. She's in government custody now. We've confirmed her identity by DNA." Lena looked at Clara, the question too big for words. Clara's eyes were already glistening. "We'll go to her. Today." Hours later, after legal confirmations, paperwork, clearance calls, and a quiet car ride that felt longer than the entire 9-year search before it, Clara and Lena arrived at the Child Protective Center tucked away behind an unmarked gate outside of San Isidro. The building looked nothing like Clara had feared, no cold metal, no guards, just a small stucco home with toys in the yard and tired social workers who had seen too much and were grateful when a story ended in something close to joy. They were ushered inside, hearts pounding, hands clasped tightly, and led down a softly lit hallway with framed drawings of stick figures and sunflowers lining the walls. A door opened slowly at the end of the hall. "She's right through there," said the staff member. We told her she'd meet someone special today. Lena hesitated in the doorway, then stepped inside. Clara followed. The room was small, filled with the gentle hum of a white noise machine and a low bookshelf stuffed with picture books. In the center sat a little girl with soft brown curls, stacking wooden blocks with clumsy but determined fingers. She wore a yellow sweater with a small giraffe stitched on the front. As they entered, she looked up. Her eyes were unmistakable, steel blue, luminous, wide like the sky before storm. Lena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, knees trembling. She whispered. That's her. The little girl stared at them, unafraid, curious. Clara placed a gentle hand on Lena's shoulder. Go to her. Lena crossed the floor slowly, dropped to her knees, and reached out. The little girl studied her for a second longer, then scooted forward and placed a small hand on Lena's. Hi, the child said softly. Are you my mama? Lena crumbled. Her arms wrapped around the girl, drawing her close, sobs breaking loose like floodwaters behind a dam. The child nestled into her, as if something long missing had just clicked into place. Clara stood watching, tears slipping freely down her cheeks, hands pressed to her mouth. After a moment, she stepped forward, kneeling beside them. I'm your grandma, she whispered, voice shaking. The little girl blinked up at her, then offered a shy smile. You smell like cookies. Lena laughed, raw and beautiful and broken. Clara wrapped her arms around both of them, holding her daughter and granddaughter in the same embrace, feeling the crushing weight of years of loss begin to lift. For the first time, the three of them were whole. Later, as they sat in the room's quiet glow, Lena brushed hair from her daughter's face and whispered. Her name, they called her C-117. But I want to name her Iris, for her eyes. Clara smiled, nodding. Iris is perfect. The social worker gave them privacy, and as the sun began to set outside the small windows, 3 generations sat together on a worn rug, the horrors of the past not erased, but no longer in control. Clara knew there would be court hearings, therapy, night terrors, years of recovery ahead. But for now, in this room, there was only breath, connection, hope. Lena kissed her daughter's forehead and leaned into her mother. We made it, she whispered. Clara nodded, her voice thick with love. We're finally home. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true inspired mysteries that stay with you long after the credits roll. What moment hit you the hardest? And where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts.